Well, I'm so glad you guys all joined today. Gals, I should say. We don't have any guys tonight. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Todd's in the other room listening, though.
Good. Good. Hi, Todd.
They say hi.
I don't think he read it, did he?
He did not.
Yeah. This was kind of a big one to get through for some of us, I think. It's a big, hefty book.
Made it though.
You can tell Tracy. Tracy, thank you
That's
for
when you start Monday.
Tracy, thank you for the organization chart. Now I can read the book and I can understand it. So I haven't done that.
We can thank Chandra for that. She had that in hers and forwarded on because the copy I had didn't have that, which.
No, mine
No,
didn't
wasn't that helpful? That was on
Yeah.
my
I made my own.
I did too.
Mine even has husbands on it.
I was gonna say it was you kind of had to figure out the husbands on your own. Yeah.
And biological fathers as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Put biological
much more
fathers on it.
Half
Yeah.
brothers, did it have that in there? So then I can ask you, Jane, what was Joan's husband's name? I was trying to think of it earlier without having to
His
look through.
name was Fenno Weld. Yeah,
Oh,
but yeah, I won't give it away. Is everybody finished the book?
I
I
didn't
almost
read
got
it.
something.
I started and I
Yes.
just could not get into it, so I thought, not happening. But I thought I'd listen and see what if you thought it was wonderful, I might still try to read it.
It was long. My only complaint was it was a little, I think she really
Drug it out.
did a little bit more than she needed to for us to get the point.
yeah.
I got it, and then she would give it to me again, and again, and again. But it was
No,
good.
and I was thinking towards the end too, for it being such a long book, that she really didn't develop personalities or like tell us too much about the characters. Like, I really feel like you didn't get hooked on anybody. I just felt as a mother instantly like, could you imagine your child falling out of the window? Like, how you move on? And that's what held me to the book. But I felt like we didn't get to know the characters. Anyone else feel like that?
I think we got to know some of them.
Yeah, I just felt like we didn't know their personality, that we didn't, we knew who they are and was trying to figure out where they fit in and who belonged to who. But that part I thought wasn't so developed, but I did like it.
Unless that was on purpose with some of them.
I poured wine into your cherry juice.
You know.
It's gone. Sorry.
Oh, you could say
We heard that.
We heard that.
Are we getting?
Domestic bliss.
So now,
Sorry.
when you're drinking cherry juice, we'll know really what's in your cherry juice. Okay.
You got to use a coffee cup. But you know that about Zoom? Oh, look.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's all right. So let's start talking about the title. The title is the guest book, but yet it's not that prominent in the actual story.
Here in this deep blue area.
But why is it so significant?
I mispronounced this earlier, we know it.
All right, tell your husband to go away.
Okay.
Okay, say go away, fella. This is confusing.
There are a couple thousand are still out here.
Either join the meeting or find
Or
another.
go away.
In these small red, that's why we need to count them all. Then you come over here, Chatham County along.
Somebody's got to
Any
mute
questions?
that.
No, it's
No,
a
that's
television.
TV.
Yeah, it's a
We're
television.
doing
You can mute.
Yep. Joe, I've muted you just because I think
There you go.
there's some noise in the background. We'll see if that's better. All right.
Well, I assume the guest book has all the names of all these families and people that visited over the years. But the one that's missing is Len.
No, he's in it.
No, Len is.
No, it's Reg that isn't in it.
Reg is
Is
missing.
Reg missing?
Yeah.
Reg is missing. Okay, which is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Well,
He's the only non-white, yeah,
yeah.
Not
He's not
invited
in
to
the
the
guest.
party.
not invited, yeah.
But yet Len was.
In it.
Mhm, mhm.
Actually, I think Reg was invited, right? And he brought
Yeah.
Lynn? Or were they
Yes.
both invited?
You're right.
Moss invited Reg.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I meant not invited to the party, I meant the racial issue.
Right, yes, yes, yeah.
Well, Len wasn't all that invited either
That's
because,
true.
yeah.
No, he wasn't.
Would someone explain to me how they assessed the relationship between Moss and Reg?
Mhm.
They were attracted sexually.
You thought so? Okay. I thought so too, but I thought maybe I'm reading something into this that wasn't
No,
meant to
I'm
be.
pretty sure they
Okay.
were.
Okay.
No, and Kitty knew that too. Kitty knew that because at one point she said, maybe I'm worried about the wrong couple. Because
Oh, yeah,
Stone and Len, and then she saw Moss and Reg and thought,
right,
so yeah.
right. I mean, I think they were soulmates too. I mean, they had a lot in common and enjoyed, discussing things, but I think they were also sexually attracted.
Mhm.
I think too, the guest book is an actual artifact. And, Evie, the last generation, is a historian and works with artifacts. I mean, in some ways they've been so silent as a family for generations. And then here's this guest book, which is sort of like evidence of some things. Most primarily Len's presence. It really proves that Len was present. Not Reg, but Len. And so it just also acts as a historical document for all of these decades, literally and figuratively as well.
Good point.
Yeah, I don't think everybody signed the guest book because like you think when they came for that party at the end, I mean, they were just like streams of people and I don't think they necessarily all signed the guest book. So I don't know how they decided who signed the guest book and who didn't sign the guest book and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I thought the title was a little misleading. So
Mhm.
Did Elsa and her husband sign the guest book? Did they
no.
indicate yes or no? And it's almost like the ones who signed were the ones they wanted to have it sign it,
Mhm.
maybe.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was a selective group.
Yeah, I don't think that was brought up when Elsa and
Yeah.
her son were there. Yeah.
I think for having the name, the guest book, I was expecting more references to the guest book, and maybe I missed them, but it just seemed like every once in a while she popped something in about it. And I think either name it something different or use it more often in storytelling.
So Chandra mentioned some of the characters not being all that developed. Of the main Milton women, Kitty, Evie, Joan, were there any you were particularly drawn to?
Well, I told you earlier this afternoon that I felt sorry for Joan. I thought she had a sad life and the stars never aligned for her the way that she had hoped they would. So I think I was drawn to her. Kitty was a product of her generation and her upbringing and went to school to learn to be a woman of her generation. So I wasn't drawn to Kitty despite the horrible thing that happened to her family when Nettie fell out the window. So it would be Joan for me.
Yeah, I loved Joan through most of the story, or when she was a young woman. But when Evie talked about her, she made her son, like she said something about she never laughed or she never joked or something. So it seems like who she was as a young woman was different than the woman that she became, because what happened that weekend
Right.
completely changed her life.
Right.
And yeah.
Did we ever learn to what their ages were too? When did Kitty end up having the girls? Do we know really how much of a difference in age they were from Moss?
I think 2 years. It
was
wasn't that
okay.
long.
Okay.
Yeah, but so in the beginning, when Nettie falls out the window, I think Moss was
Three.
5, right? And Moss
Nettie
was
was 3, right?
And then so
Joan was a
Joan
baby.
in a year.
Yeah.
Or not Joan, I'm sorry.
No, Joan was a year. Yeah. And
then
yeah.
and Evelyn was born the year after that, or 2 years after.
Yeah. Yeah. I had mixed feelings about June because at the end, before the tragedy of Len leaving, she had kind of decided that he just was not going to fit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very surprised about her thinking that way, that it was so ingrained in her about this family and how they were and where they belonged and how people had to fit into their family and be on the kind of the same social level, think the same way. So I lost a little bit of my sympathy for her there at the end.
Don't you think that's typical of that time period, of the rigidness of the social structure and how people didn't fit in? You stayed in the social structure that you had. I found it interesting that I could hear about a Jewish background and how they fit in, and a Black background, how it fit in that part of time as opposed to currently. That was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Instead of being hit over the head all the time with all that stuff, to just see how they were part of the story, to me was interesting.
Yeah, it was. But for her to make that more important than her feelings for Len, and I think that fitting in even applied different social structures, even if you were both white, if you came from a different strata, I think the same things happened.
Yeah. I think she was kind of trying to protect Len, actually, knowing what she knew, that he wouldn't fit in and he would end up being miserable. And, so I thought maybe she was trying to be just a little bit almost sacrificial in terms of, protecting him from what she perceived their life would be like.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Even though Len was the heir apparent almost to Ogden's, empire, it wasn't going to seem like it was going to make enough difference. So I thought she was being a little protective there.
I didn't get that impression.
No.
It had more to do with the fact that Len didn't want to fit in, and he wanted something different, and that was something she couldn't accept, because she knew she'd have to at least partially leave that like really insular life if she was going to be with Len. And I think if Len had wanted to fit in, that she may have felt differently, but I think it was because, and he said it to her, he said it, that, oh, there's so much more than this. We don't know what's this. So that's how I took it. I took it a little differently.
I think her epilepsy also was a factor, because she needed the support of her family, and that's all she had ever known. So even though Len would have been there for her, I think her epilepsy was so scary to her. if she left that cocoon of the family, you know, who was going to support her, even though she didn't want them to know when she had seizures. So I think that was a real obstacle for her.
So they had quite a few challenges then, didn't they? They wasn't just that he was Jewish, or how much did that weigh into the not fitting together?
Although Evie married a Jewish person. And it worked, sort of. I had trouble with Kitty, all of them. I understand that when Kitty was growing up in her time, that's what happened. You were trained a certain way and taught a certain way, and you stuck with that. But I guess I still have trouble with this idea of the rigidity of not accepting change and differences, especially when it has to do with important social issues. Just because you're of a certain economic level.
I think that.
I guess it still happens, doesn't it?
Yes, I was just going to say, I think the economic level protects you from a lot of those issues, and you see them so differently because you are so insular. And I think it's very hard. I'm currently reading Caste. I don't know if any of you have read Caste yet. No. I mean, it just absolutely flows from this book, right? But Caste is about American history and treatment of African Americans by and large. So but I do think that these people live an isolated life. I think today, even the wealthy lead a less insulated life. They're very well protected, but I think they're much more aware of issues if they make any effort at all. Than say these wasps. We don't even have wasps anymore, really. You know, I grew up in Massachusetts. And, you know, one of the sayings, I remember how difficult it was for people to vote for President Kennedy because he was Catholic.
Yeah.
You know, it was that's all people could think of. But, you know, there was an expression, the Cabots speak only to the lodges and the lodges speak only to God. That's all I could think of in this book was, this is the Miltons, and they talk about the Lowells. That's a huge Eastern family, the Saltonstalls, all of these people. And all I could keep thinking of was the Cabots speak only to the lodges and the lodges speak only to God. The isolation, especially at Kitty's generation, was absolute, I think.
Right.
I mean, you had help, domestics, but that was it. Jones was less so. She grew up, in the 50s, post-World War II. I can see that she might not have the courage of her convictions. You know, working women were fairly new. She had difficulties. I was most sympathetic to Evie. She actually was the last generation. She actually was trying to sort things out. I don't think she married Paul, a Jewish man, just to stick her thumb in everybody's eye. I think there was genuine love and respect. So I liked her the best. And it's partly because she's much more current, modern. I could maybe relate to her better, but I think she was trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with this family, because she knew something was. Although she herself was so attached to that darn island, I don't know how she functioned.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I just, I think their level of isolation is caused by their wealth. And I think those earlier generations, my dad was born in 1908. I don't think he had a clue.
So was mine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't know, maybe your dad, I don't think he had a clue he understood the social issues intellectually. I don't think he was capable of wrapping his mind around what needed to be done. You know, for instance, issues of people of color, it just wasn't going to happen with him. accepted like Kitty did, but everybody just sort of was separate, and that's the way it was supposed to be. And there was just no way around it. Yeah, I don't know.
My parents got angry that I was dating a Catholic boy.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Very angry.
So Kitty's view was that a woman was meant to tend a garden, a child, or a conversation. So what, kind of leading off of what you said too, but what does this say about gender dynamics through these different marriages and generations?
Yeah.
Well, they changed. They changed.
She was totally supportive of her husband and his advancement and his social standing, doing all the right things. And Evie was able to be bolder about discussing things with her husband and differences and
Well, it's just like us.
standing up for
We're
herself.
different than our parents. And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
view things differently and we do things differently. It's just, things change and maybe,
Luckily.
things get a little looser, kind of thing. And so it's a progression, I guess.
And our kids are different than us.
Right. Right. Your kids, I think they might be a little different than we are.
Mhm. Oh, yeah.
I was interested in Ogden's reaction to Kitty's confession, essentially, about turning down taking care of Willie when Elsa asked her. Willie, that was his name, right? Was the boy's name? Because Kitty said she thought she was doing the right thing.
Right thing.
She was totally misreading the situation of Ogden's type of involvement, and perhaps if she had discussed it with Ogden, they might have been a different decision. But I got the feeling that Ogden was just simply not pleased with Kitty's decision to have come to that decision on her own to refuse helping Willie. Did anybody else feel that way when Ogden found out about it? That he said, we'll just go forward from here, but I got the feeling that, I don't know, it was almost like another death in the family. Not that Ogden, I don't think he was, not that Ogden was so committed to this child, but it's like, I don't know, was Kitty responsible for the death of another boy? It was just, she so misread that situation. And she just couldn't, now maybe she couldn't open her heart because she'd already lost a young boy. So she couldn't imagine bringing on another one. But it had so much to do with closed social situations, with Jewishness, with not seeing the future, which you can't blame anybody for. But I mean, what a heartfelt plea to say, please take my boy, when you say, no, I can't.
But
I might say no
it was
too,
because
but-
she had lost her son. I mean, she said it has nothing to do with being Jewish. It was because she had lost her son. And that's why.
Yeah, that I was going to ask about that. She said it's not that he was Jewish, it was that he was alive.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean, Cher?
Yeah.
Is that what she meant? The fact
That's what I
that
thought she meant.
he was alive and her son wasn't?
Right. They must have been about the same age, and she just couldn't see, taking that on,
Yeah, but she said something to Elsa when she said no. She said, well, what would we do with him? How would we, and she said something about because they weren't Jewish, they didn't know how to raise a Jewish child. And that's when Elsa turned around and walked away. And so I agree that the Nettie thing was an issue, but I think there was more to it than that. And I think, she thought she was doing what I've been like. So, you put all three of those things together.
Yeah, because Kitty says it's complicated. And I believe Elsa says, no, it's not, it's simple.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and of course it's not simple, but it's also not complicated.
Right.
You know, a young child's life, and and the truth is, Kitty, with as much money as they had and prestige, she could do anything she wanted to.
Yeah.
You could have taken Willie and
Right.
assigned him to a nanny and never dealt with him. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
there are
Right,
ways around her issues, whether it was his background or what. There was ways she could have still saved the child and not had to deal with it.
Did she really realize that he was that much in peril? Do you think?
No, I don't. I
I
I
don't.
don't
think
know.
so.
I don't think
Yeah.
so.
Mm-mm.
And can you imagine being asked that? Like,
Didn't know this person. She didn't know Elsa.
Yeah.
just met her.
I
Like,
was
had to-
surprised
pretty much
she
had to
didn't
decide on the
ask,
spot. Go ahead, Joe.
I was surprised that she didn't ask Ogden and why she asked Kitty,
Yeah,
because she didn't really know Kitty.
right.
That
right.
just, I mean, why wouldn't she have talked it over with Ogden and had Ogden approach Kitty and gone around the other way?
I think because she wanted Ogden to help with the resistance. And if and that's what she was asking him to do, and he was refusing. And if she then asked about the child, he probably would have said yes, and then that would be the end of it. She couldn't ask him to be part of the resistance anymore. So I think it was like, because then he'd be, well, I'm doing this, why do I have to do something else? That's what I thought.
But he was the one that was connected to her.
Right.
Mhm.
And I think he would have done almost anything for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could have been an entirely different outcome.
So I didn't quite understand the way they approached that in the book. I just, yeah.
Well, that would
interesting
have
that-
made. Go ahead.
It's interesting that Evie in the very beginning of the book, she's teaching her class and she asks them if someone asked you in 1939 to hide a Jew, would you have done it? And
Oh,
it
yeah.
it comes back around. Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has some pretty poignant questions for.
Yeah, she did.
But you do wonder when you're in situations, what
Yeah.
would you answer? On that, let me jump. Paul, while he wasn't really a main character, he had kind of a pivotal part in the plot, and kind of what you were going on with Jane. Like, his main work was the idea that there is the crime and there is the silence. And one thing he said caught me, the ordinary, everyday wickedness of turning away. How does that kind of echo through the novel and the events that occur?
Well, I'll jump in for a minute. This is Anne. It seems to me there's a lot of secrets, and that was, of course, what Evie was trying to figure out, all these secrets in the family. And to me, this is one of the weak spots of the book is all that guilt that she's trying to put on these people, and the guilt that they're trying to figure out how to deal with. The upper class should feel guilty for their wealth, and yes, those are important questions, but it seemed a little heavy-handed to me. So I guess that was my one complaint with the book. There were all these people that were outcasts or not touchables, and this caste system and these people who own this island, and so I don't know. I mean, I think I like the fact that there's complications, and she brings up those complications, but it just seemed a little heavy-handed to me that she was just pointing out their guilt. So.
Well, but I think in a lot of families that there is a, generational, if you look at almost any family, depending on what social status they are, there's probably a lot of complications in almost every family, if you really look at it. And if
Very
people told
true.
the stories.
Yeah, very true.
I can't imagine a family that doesn't have some intrigue and some, this one did that and that happened. And who knows who this father is? And is it really your daddy? I mean, I think a lot of things come out late in life that would shock a lot of people, maybe.
I think a couple
Maybe
of,
not, but I think if you looked at generations of families, especially large families, that you'd find a lot of that. I don't know.
I think, Anne, I agree. Anne, I think what you're saying is she seemed, and I had said this earlier, she seemed to really kind of keep pounding the same points home, some of the same points home, but I think it's true that these were people of privilege, and we still have a lot of people of privilege, and we among them probably, who don't know how to relate to some things that are going on around us. And her point was, I think, the point she was trying to make, that we need to pay attention more.
Yeah, good point.
Be more aware. Put ourselves in some situations.
So you're feeling like you were hit over the head with like it was real. I didn't feel that.
Yeah,
I didn't feel that way at all. I felt that it showed the strata of society, what it was truly like at one point and another point and a third point, and how that changed as each generation came along. And I didn't feel strong-armed into that decision. I just felt that I could see what was happening, and I liked it for that. I thought that that was valuable for me to see the progression of how we've changed over the years.
Oh, so Tracy, back to your question about the crime and then the silence. I always had this question about, did Ogden really know what he was doing in Germany with the Walsers and Elsa and where that was all going? So was he witnessing and just being silent about that? Or did he think he was helping because he invested in that? Or I was a little mixed up about his real intentions and involvement and what he really knew about what was going on or what wasn't going on. When Paul found that picture of him sitting there with the other, Nazis, it's like, here's another silent thing going on that he carried around and apparently felt no guilt about it from, because when Len confronted him about the contracts and he said, what are these? And he said, a bad call. That's all? A bad call?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And he said then in the end, we lost everything. So it was a bad investment. Yeah, to me, that's
shows a bit of the disconnection there too.
Yeah. I was just, he seemed like otherwise a really good man, and a lot of good qualities, but really just had blinders on when it came to this. I don't know.
I think he was naive.
Go ahead, Jane.
I think he was naive, and he was all about the economics, and he truly felt that as did I think a number of people, that the treaties that had been made with Germany were very economically punishing, and he saw it as not only he saw it mainly as a way for his company to make money, perhaps, but he also saw it as a way for to help get the economy going in Germany too. And he was just very naive about how these things were going to be used.
Right, right. Well, he said though, when he talked to Len, he said it wasn't about the money. It was never about the money or about the profit. And Len says, well, what was it about? And he says, order, stability, old friends. I don't know.
Well, yeah, at one point he said something like he was so taken with Elsa and Elsa's father that he couldn't believe that Elsa's, what was his name? I forget.
Walzer was the last name, I think.
Yeah, that he could be doing anything wrong or bad. You know, he felt he was an honorable person, and he thought Elsa's father was an honorable person. So I don't think he saw it, in my opinion.
Well, there were several instances of the turning away of and not simple turning away, the crime and then the silence. And Kitty turned away from accepting Willie, and Joan turned away from Lynn. And then Paul himself talks about those stumble stones, and the stones are meant to be reminding you you can't be silent. The crime is there. Each of those represents a crime, a murder of an individual for no other reason than being Jewish or gay or a gypsy or whatever reason they were chosen to be killed for. And the stumble stones are a reminder. And Paul became, that was his, not obsession, but that became his passion, and to work with those stumble stones. And I think that's one of the ways that you have the crime and the silence and the stumble stones, just as some of these family members were stumbling, in the literal sense of the word, stumbling over their own history, and being reminded of it a piece at a time. I thought the author did, I was not really especially fond of this book, but I think the author did a lot of pulling things together, trying to weave in. It's hugely complicated to weave all this stuff into one story. And so I thought she did a good job of trying to, actually she states her themes, the crime and then the silence, and then and not many authors do that and can get away with it and still making an interesting story instead of an agenda-laden screed. But I do think she did use that, what would that be, a motif for that subject of crime and then covered up by silence, turning away from it, and made you think about the many ways that we all do it, just by being silent, like Kitty, or making a choice like Joan. That was really a crime against Len, that she did that. The relationship they had. I don't know. I thought the author did a good job of pulling these threads. And like Karen said, she didn't hit you over the head all the time. She let the story unravel, or, you pull these threads and then you get this and you get this revelation. But yeah, it was an interesting way to go about writing a family saga.
I think it could have been clearer. Some of it, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier, I don't know if it was the style of writing or what, but it was a long time before I had these characters sorted out. And I thought you could have just been a little clearer here. That would have been helpful to just be clear. And I wouldn't have named the one girl Evie after the sister either. I wouldn't have. I would have kept it. I would have named her Sue or something, so that we wouldn't have been confused. Well, why confuse us? Why? It didn't make sense to me. And I like this book. I actually thought it was pretty good, but it took a long time before I had all these people straight, and I'm not even sure if I always did.
I took a lot of notes.
So I have a question. Joan's husband, we know a little bit about him when he's a young man. And then as an older man and as Joan's husband and as Evie's father, all we know is that he drank a lot and seemed to be kind of a misfit or something in a way. And we don't know why. I mean, why?
I can guess.
Or do
Oh, I
we?
can guess.
I
Oh,
can
yeah.
guess.
I
Yeah,
think
I
he-
can guess.
I think that wasn't
No.
I don't know. Why not tell us?
We know. We know. He
We
adored this woman.
know.
He adored her the whole time. And then yes, she married him just as an excuse so that she could
Have the
hide the
baby.
fact that she had this baby.
Right.
And so he spent his adult life as a lie. And that's what did him in, as how I interpreted it.
And wasn't receiving a lot of warmth, I don't think, from Joan,
Mm-hmm.
because she couldn't give warmth to anybody after that.
So he knew that Joan was.
I think so.
Oh, yes.
I think so. Yeah. It's just
Oh,
that Evie
I'm
didn't.
sure he knew.
I just
Yeah.
that
Well,
Evie
the-
didn't know, which really surprises me that her mother never told her ever.
Yeah, but wasn't it Kitty that always said whenever the grandchild came, she knew immediately because he looked just like the father.
Right. But the question is, did the
But
So the
nobody
rest
talked
of
about
them
it.
must have realized, including the husband.
yeah.
But
I
but
think that
remember
was pretty evident.
the family credo though is we don't need to talk about those things. So
Right.
nobody
Well,
ever
right,
talked
but
about
they
it.
still all
Exactly.
knew.
I think they knew all except Evie.
Yeah, I think that happens in a lot of situations. Yeah. But I really enjoyed the book. And I can see why Joan didn't want to leave that island or the family. And she loved what's his
Len.
name? I can't think right now.
Len,
Yeah. But I think she realized that she couldn't be happy without being with the family. And I can understand that. You know, all the money and all the other sometimes isn't quite enough. Especially if you like your family.
But did it seem like she was happy then? At least from what we hear
Well,
from Evie?
I don't know, but who knows? I think
Evie
she
implied that her-
preferred to. What?
Evie implied what?
Evie implied that her mother never really talked to her very much about things, didn't really, discuss things with her or,
Said she
yeah,
she
it
never
didn't sound
smiled-
like they
she
had a
never
close
smiled.
relationship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got the impression from Evie that Joan was a very unhappy person.
Mhm.
Very
Mhm.
unhappy.
Well, they were just kind of drifting through life. I don't have the book in front of me, but there was a way that she said it. It was like they're just shells of people, and they're just not really living. I don't know what she said exactly, but it was
I think it was
like they're not really living, either one of them. They're just kind of going through the motions of life, and that was it. Very no joy, no unhappiness, just there,
I think it was somehow related to like they inherited their lives, not that they chose
Right.
them, but
Yeah.
not that I'm not quoting that specifically, but yeah.
I would say that's
And yet
true
they didn't
ex-
want to give it up.
Yeah, and I would say that's
You
true,
know,
except
they
for
didn't
when
really
got to-
want to change too much.
except when they got to the island, that's where they were happy, which is, the part
Yeah.
of the book that I could really relate to, coming to Door County where there were cousins and grandparents and, growing up at a place that was a gathering place every summer. I think the author did a really good job of kind of describing that experience of a family gathering at a place. And that was the place that kind of, they were able to put all their other concerns and shells, aside. They could just be together, and that, so I can understand how the rest of their lives they were unhappy, but that they came to this island and they were happy. You know, despite all the secrets and the, you know, the prejudice and the elitism that they experienced, I think the island did give them something they couldn't get anywhere else in the world.
I agree with that, because I happen to live on a beach where there's 8 of our cousins along the same beach. So I understand that. We all get together and it's very comfortable.
Well, and the author admits that the island itself is based on her own family's island.
Right.
So I think she understands what that can be, what kind of place that can be. What do you think?
It's sort of like everybody knows the story, so you don't have to explain anything to you know, especially when it's multi-generational. I think I'm 5th generation here.
So what do you think the cousins ended up doing with the island? I don't think they specifically said anything, did they? They kind of left that open.
Sounds like they were gonna
It
rent
was gonna
or
be a
sell
VR
part of it
It's gonna
to.
be a VRBO, don't you think? It was a VRBO.
Yeah. I think they were gonna rent or sell part of it to Reg or to Charlie. And then I think they were gonna try and keep it. I got the impression Evie was really gonna try and keep it. Somehow. With Charlie's financial input. Helpful financial input.
I can't remember what Reg was. He said he didn't want it, didn't he?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
He gave it back to Evie.
He gave it back because he gave, yes.
He didn't
But,
want,
yeah, I got the distinct impression that Charlie is either going to purchase part of it, which would give them a big influx of cash, which they could then help. And if they did that, and then they could rent out the place. I think cousin Henry, Min's brother, Minerva's brother. I think he wanted to possibly rent it out as well. I think they'll keep the island. I got the definite feeling they would that they would be successful in keeping it. Not as Kitty kept it, but
In the family.
keeping it, yeah. Or at least a good portion of it.
Yeah, the one brother Shep, he was already sailing ships out of that harbor. And so he already had a business ready to take people back and forth. So he's all set up and ready to go for the rental, I think.
So what did you think of Kitty's leaving part of the island to Reg? Was she trying to make up for how she treated him, or was it simply more of the same old ideas?
I took it as making up for trying to make it right with Moss. I mean, I think she knew full well that they could have been lovers in a different time. I think she was making amends, maybe atoning would be a different word, for having for losing Nettie, for having said no to Willie. You know, this was something she could do for Moss. And, you know, I think she came to a realizations late, like maybe Joan's difficulties. You know, it was one thing she could do. I don't think it was meant, I think it was one of the few things in the whole book that you saw Kitty do that was from her heart. You know, just deeply felt. I thought that it had a purity to it, maybe, I think. I don't know.
So I agree with that. I liked that she did that.
And this I think is related, but why did she tell Reg about saying no to Willie. She had never told anyone else. And she told Reg when she first met him. And like I said, I don't think that's unrelated to her giving him part of the island. I don't know.
Good question. I don't know.
Anyone have thoughts on that? Because at that point, that was quite a few years that she'd been living with this and hadn't told anyone. Sherry, you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, I think she just was ready to unload, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And so I think, you know, she figured, well, who is Reg going to tell, you know, and what difference would it make? I can just, you know, I can just unload here. And maybe if it did get out, then it would be a good thing. Who knows what was really behind it, but I think it was just obviously not contemplated that she would ever do this. You know, but it just, I guess, I don't know. She wanted him to know something about her. And I don't know why exactly, but she wanted to make some kind of connection.
I think I remember, I think she liked him. I mean, I think
she enjoyed talking to him.
She found him comfortable to talk to and she liked him. But it is a good question. I don't know how she, yeah.
Just another complication.
Yeah, and another thing, it seems like none of the other children knew that Teddy even existed. I mean, it just you know, I feel like in some ways this book is about how dangerous it is to keep secrets and to not talk about things like real life things that happen and how damaging it is to do that, and the damage just carries on.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, even the cousins and their opinion of Moss, it seemed like they kind of went through life thinking Moss had been kind of this crazy uncle that they lost before they were even born.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was the caretaker was like, no, Moss was fine.
Yeah, I think the story they told was that he was trying to rescue somebody and he drowned. I mean, they made up a story even about how he died.
Right.
So what about Joan wanting to be buried in that spot without her name, just the word here? What was that about?
The stumble stone.
Oh.
Remember Willie's stumble stone just says died here when Paul found it in Germany. And then Joan wanted her stone just to say here, because here was where she lost Len. And life changed. I don't know. It all happened there. She conceived Evie and lost Len. That was my thought anyway.
What about the comment that a Jew died that night?
Yeah, that was confusing.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was, how did she put it? It was a Jew and Moss and a Jew, or how did she say it? And it was, yeah, it's like, oh, really?
Oh.
For a long time, I thought, in fact, that Len did drown
Me
that
too.
night. So it was an unraveling again of a mystery. I was surprised. I mean, it was pretty evident when Charlie showed up with the last name Levi or Levy that this is clearly somebody's, you know. But so that sort of then it's like, oh. So I wonder what that was. I don't know though. Was it because a part of Len died that night as well?
His relationship with the family died that night.
Yeah. And remember, Len kept the spoon
Yeah.
Mhm.
and gave it all those years. He kept the spoon, even though he married somebody else and had different children. He kept the spoon that he was going to use to help Joan with her epilepsy seizures, and gave it to somebody to do something with. Yeah. So I just got the feeling that a whole part of Len died that night too. But I don't know, it was sort of a mystery.
I got to tell you, when his son was on the boat and brings out that spoon, I cried.
Yeah. Oh. Oh.
Yeah.
Damn spoon making me cry.
No, it's like Joe said, there's so many connections that when you look at families and connections and things, you can see some things that if you look with a fresh eye, sometimes you might be surprised. But I don't know. I thought the author did a good job of leading us astray, leading, like a Jew died that night, but it certainly wasn't Len, as it turned out. And Moss was I don't know. I think she did a good job. I'm not sure why I didn't like the book as much as I perhaps should have, because I thought her writing was excellent. I think I just never cared about the people. I just never could quite pick up enough to care. I mostly was just reading through it and enjoying the author's writing, but never really, maybe, isn't it that who started out with that? Marsha or Chandra? Chandra.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, that you just didn't get in. There wasn't enough character development to really get to know everybody. And I think I was really lucky to find that graphic too, to know as I started it too, where everybody was, because I read about 50 pages and I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a lot. I could tell already.
Yeah, I was hoping there weren't going to be more, It's like, because every other chapter, no, there's more.
And they're all named Evie.
Right.
It's 4 Evvies. Right.
Well, what book did we read last winter where there are like 179 characters? What was it? Remember that one?
I think that was the Door County Read, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, was it the Door County Read that it was that many? Maybe it was.
I think it was. I can't think of the name of it. With Virgil Wander.
Yes.
Virgil Wander. Yes.
Yeah. But at least we had one Virgil, the one main character.
Right.
Here it
There was
feels
no
like
Verge.
main characters. Yeah.
Minerva. Minerva was an interesting name to name your child.
Yes.
Minerva.
They never said how Moss got his nickname, did they?
No.
Ogden's middle name was Moss.
Oh, was it?
If you look at the family tree, it's Ogden Moss
Milton.
And then Moss's first name was also Ogden. So they called him Moss.
Okay. I didn't look close enough.
Well, there you go.
I saw that.
So the author tackles quite a lot of big issues with this.
Yeah.
With racism, religion, class, gender. Does she do it in a new way, a different way than we're used to? What did she do right here, if anything?
I think it flowed well. I think it flowed really well, and there was a lot of actual historical number of references that were real. I thought were interesting, like Reg meeting James Baldwin and Greenwich Village, and that bar. What was it? The White Horse. Is a real place. It was known for the place where a lot of authors of that era used to meet. And at first that's what I think I meant. I felt like she was tackling all these, trying to get all these issues covered. But she did a good job of it. I don't know if it was done differently, but
I think by skipping around, it was easier to handle it than had she done just Kitty's
Yeah.
story and then just Joan's story.
That's
and
true.
then just Evie's. I think you would have been going, yeah, really, really another issue? Where this way they all sort of wove them all together.
Yeah.
Life is messy. There's lots of issues in families.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel she had a main point or reason for writing this?
Didn't you say that she grew up on an island? And
Well, they
that-
had an island.
Yeah, so that maybe that was a point of great interest to her, and she saw how you could, you know, weave these things into something through that one particular spot. That's all I can think of.
So many of these issues are just right in our face these days, and we're not doing the best job handling them. Racism, elitism, so many, we're just sort of floundering ourselves. And maybe this was her attempt to understand how we got to this point. When you start a few generations back and see the isolation and how they're not dealing with it, or how they did deal with it, which was that it's a whole separate problem. It's not their problem. And then moving forward through the change we've all talked about in the generations, and how maybe it was just an attempt to get from there to here, with these large issues that our current society we're just trying to deal with, and it's kind of messy. So maybe this is one way to do it. Yeah, don't know.
What was the copyright date on this book? I didn't.
2019.
2019. Yeah, pretty recent then.
Or was it 18? You may be right. No, 2019.
Yeah.
So what about how it ends? Evie whispers, "We vanish," and it's the final line. What do you think of that? What's the effect of that?
You vanish.
Well,
I didn't remember it, so obviously it didn't stick with me.
Yeah.
We're all looking.
News to me.
I know, I thought there would be another chapter after that.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, what? Acknowledgements?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that last line rang very true, because I mean, really, she unearthed secrets and she brought things to life, and she, had some reckonings. And so to me, it's not that they're vanishing, it's that maybe they brought things to life. So it didn't ring true to me, that last line.
And I found in my notes where at a different point in the novel, I didn't write who she was talking to. It might have been Paul, but she says, "Do we mostly just rise up, wave a little, and vanish without seeing one another?"
That's how I took it. I took it as we vanish because we don't know each other. We don't know who we are. We might not even know who we are ourselves, but there are stories that linger. There are artifacts that linger, but we ourselves vanish. We're gone. The person we were is no more, except family histories or how the memories are or whatever people are saying about you later, but you're gone. And nobody really knew who you were. We occupy space for quite a while, and then we're gone. And that's how I took it. I think it was sort of like a real moment of realization when she was watching her son, and then to put that in context, and then her son, she was imagining her son in the future in middle age, And then remembering this day in his middle age, she'd be gone and we just vanish. So I took it that we're not very real. I mean, we're real, but only for a short period of time. And then the stories take over. Somebody else's idea of who you were takes over and you're gone.
I found in the question here, it says, this is Paul telling Evie, there is no story until we're dead, and then our children tell it. We are just living. Your mother was living. Stop looking for what's not there. Nothing happened. Life happened. Reality is not a story. So I guess he would agree with Evie then. We vanish.
Yeah.
That's an odd thing. Reality is not a story.
Yeah.
I found him kind of interesting the way he kind of approached things like that, but yet he was the one really digging into some of the history and these stumble stones. And
yeah,
I don't know. It was almost contradictory viewpoints he had there.
Yeah.
But it seemed like Evie was really trying to know her mother more and never, I don't know if she ever felt she did, but, and related to what Paul's comment was, do we ever really know? Do children ever really know their parents?
Depends. Not if they don't want you to know. I remember I was late 20s and I found out my father had been married before. Big secret.
Big secrets.
Yep. Yeah, my mother's mother died of an abortion. Big secret.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, which weren't legal at the time, so you know where I stand on that.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
pretty scary.
As Joe said, every family has secrets.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sure. And it's hard to know each other around those secrets, because if you don't know the secret, what do you know about the person whose secret you don't know?
You don't understand maybe why they are the way they are. And Evie didn't understand that until she learned what had happened. And she'll probably understand a little bit more now about her mother.
Well, her dissertation was on a weird thing, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I have never heard of that.
I had to look that up. I hadn't either. I looked it up, and there were pictures of these places where these women would actually, they were like, built into these little cubic, these little tiny things. And
like Kitty, and
sounds horrible.
Like everybody in the story were in their little
tiny, and compartments.
Yeah.
And I thought too that Kitty was the most like the anchoresses. Her box was the most rigid.
Oh, yeah.
And then the generations coming after that started to break down that box, that being walled in to such a narrow, rigid definition of who you are, and what your role is. And so I just sort of saw it as a progression. It was being revised each time. And then poor Evie was going to be revised completely academically by the young woman coming behind her. So I just saw that as like what the whole book was about. Breaking down boxes, breaking out of confinement.
Good.
Otherwise, I couldn't get the point of anchoresses.
Anchoress, anchoresses.
What a weird
Ladies,
thing.
I'm going to go listen to what's happening on the news, because I need to know just a little. I already read next month's book, and I will tell you it's a big eh.
Oh no.
What is next month?
What is next?
Lightkeeper's Legacy.
Oh, I've already read it and I'm rereading it. Yes.
And what do you think? Did you go, eh?
Well, my interest is my family name was Betts, and I had no idea that the lighthouse keeper, there was a real lighthouse keeper at Potawatomi Light named Betts, because I'm not from here. So I think, oh, well, I'll read this. And anyway, it's a murder mystery. So it's, I don't know. I don't think we'll discuss it some other time, but it's okay.
In about a month, I think.
In about a month.
Sounds like a good read for November.
Yes. Might not be as big and deep and heavy as the
No.
guest book.
No,
I
it's
do
not.
have a message out to the author to see if she will join us next month. So maybe that'll make it more interesting if she's able to join us.
Hey, cool.
But we'll see. She hasn't gotten back to me yet. So, any final thoughts on the guest book? There's a lot to this. I'm sure we could pick into it for hours, but any
Well,
big things
I
you missed
started
that
a guest
anybody wanted
book
to say?
I started a guest book for when we moved up here in 2017, but we don't have many entries for this summer. So
Oh, that's telling in itself, isn't it?
Right?
2020 in the empty guest book.
That was pretty realistic. The novel.
The novel. Mhm.
I appreciate it having been obligated to read it. I do. I know. I'm glad I read. I'm glad I read it. It's as I said, it's not all. I wouldn't have picked it up. And sometimes I really just find I love a book that I would never have picked up, but it just didn't happen for me for this one. But
Maybe that next
always
one, Jane.
appreciate- Huh?
Maybe that next one will.
I genuinely appreciate having to read a book that is just not something I would ordinarily do, and it doesn't matter if I like it or not. I appreciate the and people were so thoughtful and thinking about the meaning of it, and also I thought it was a good choice for a book club.
yeah,
Good
I
book
have a
choice
lot
for-
of members here.
Yeah.
Did anyone like this enough they would recommend it to others?
Depends on who it would be.
Yeah, depends. I told my daughter-in-law I was going to send it to her. I said, it's an okay book. And she said, oh, just okay. And you're sending it to me.
Way to sell it.
I said, well, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it does lend itself to discussion, that's for sure. And that's
It
what I
does,
think is
yeah,
the interesting
yeah.
part. We have things that we can talk about here and so I think for that aspect, Jane, you should say that it's a good book and you and your daughter-in-law will have a good discussion.
Yeah. It was a good discussion book.
Has anyone read The Dressmaker?
Yes.
I've heard that that's an excellent book, and is that one worth talking about also?
Is that the one about Mrs. Lincoln's Dressmaker?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've only heard that it's good. I have not read it, but
Oh.
I've heard that from various sources.
Yeah, I think I did read that. It was pretty good.
I think we read it for a book club together, Jane, didn't we?
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
We were both.
There's
in
a
it.
Because I
couple
was always
different
amazed at
ones.
how she made the
Which one?
whole dress by hand. Just couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
Oh,
If
really?
you're gonna read it, there's more than one book called The Dressmaker.
Dressmaker. Okay.
And there's ones that have The Dressmaker and then some other word, but there's two that are out now called The Dressmaker, because we ran into that in one of my book clubs. Was we were going to read The Dressmaker and then nobody was quite sure which one we were going to read, because there's two out.
Well, I want to know if Sue, are you going to read the book based on this discussion?
No. No. I'm not gonna. I read the first like 60, 70 pages and I thought, I just, gotta grab me, and it just did not grab me. And I'm glad I benefited from all of your reading, but that's just not my kind of a book. So, but thank you for asking.
Thanks for coming anyway. I appreciate you listening. It was
Good to see everybody.
Tragic at times too. There were some hard parts to deal with, but I enjoyed it overall. Bye, Karen.
Bye.
Hi, Karen.
Bye, Karen. All right. Well, I think we should probably wrap up anyway. So thank you all for coming. If anyone has any last thoughts, welcome to share them. But otherwise, we will meet next month, most likely virtually again. It doesn't look like that's changing anytime soon, sad as that is.
Right.
With the cold winter nights, this is not too bad in stay home.
You'll have to drive home afterwards. Well, I do, but that's
I
okay.
know. Well, thank you all.
Well, thanks, Tracy.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thanks for your
Thank
good
you.
input.
It's always interesting.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. See you later.
Bye all. Night.
Good night.
Okay.